And it is 6 o'clock, so I will call us to order. I will let Frank in.
Thank you, and I know I'm gonna have to race to the audio thingy because I did the host last night and I had it on full blast.
All right, so let me just start with
progress.
where we are, which is the WSESU mission is to provide a safe, inclusive, and supportive environment where all students grow academically, socially, and emotionally, and are challenged to reach their potential as local and global community members. So, as always, I will try to keep us focused on what is the will of the board. Let us start with the approval of minutes of November 30th. Is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Now, I know that Michelle had emailed an amendment.
She's not online.
She's not online. We could table this till the next meeting, or we could do a courtesy of allowing the amendment to go in.
You know, I'll make the amendment myself with with some remarks.
Okay,
We follow Robert's rules. Roberts is pretty unequivocal in saying that minutes should record what was done at the meeting and not what was said by members. And you don't attribute comments to individuals. It's all there in section 48 of Roberts. However, there is a section 48.3 that says that that allows a member to make a motion to enter something into the minutes that's not normally entered into the minutes. There's very good reason for not entering personal comments or and Roberts is clear about that. You don't want to politicize anything. You don't want to personalize it. You just want minutes to reflect what was done.
Mhm.
And nevertheless, as a courtesy to Michelle, I will make the motion to enter the rationale for Michelle abstaining from certain motions.
okay. Is there a second to the amendment?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay. Let's vote on the amendment. Liz, welcome. So we are voting on amending the minutes based on something Michelle would like entered. Tim has made the motion to amend. Kelly has seconded it. So now we're going to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Wait, I'm confused. Is Tim countering Mich?
No,
I'm-
Tim is agreeing with Michelle to amend the minutes as she would like them to be amended.
Okay, got it.
So all those in favor of making the amendment, say aye.
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 Okay, now on to the minutes. All those in favor of passing the minutes as amended, say aye.
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 All right, we are now moving on to the sorry,
Make one more comment.
you may.
According to Robertson, this whole discussion is not entered into the minutes, but only the minutes will show minutes approved as corrected.
That makes sense to me. Or as amended, or do we say corrected?
As corrected.
Corrected, that's fine. All right, administrative report.
We only have an hour and a lot to get to with the budget, so I'll be fairly brief. Paul Smith and I met with Christopher Overtree today, this afternoon, to review kind of an update of school climate and process, actually. So next steps are Chris will be supplying us with a handful of days that we will share with school leadership teams. And then Chris will start visiting us in our schools and working with each individual school leadership team, students, and staffs to unpack the data, identify goals for improvement, And then when that work is completed, Chris and I talked about coming to an SD meeting, likely to kind of present the process and the work that's being done. Let's see, last time we talked about a potential bus strike. We were able to avoid that, thankfully, as the drivers in Kosmeskis Bus Company settled on terms, which is great. For about 16 years now, our school district has been partnering with Project Feed the Thousands, the local food drive. And proud to say that we're going to continue to do that this year. We have been doing that in all of our schools. The BOHS Student Council asked me to share with the board and the community that they are hosting a food drive this Sunday from 9 to 3 in the staff parking lot. And then, as is a tradition going back about 12 years, on December 16th, there will be a Fill the Bus event at Hannaford's grocery store, where throughout the day, students in our various schools will be working shifts at the grocery store, collecting donations for Project Feed. And the goal is to fill an entire school bus of food. And we've done that every year. So it's kind of a nice tradition. So if you're out shopping on the 16th, be sure to visit with the kids.
At Hannaford, you said?
Hannaford's, yeah.
When you say staff parking lot, you mean the one by the auditorium?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Actually, that's a good clarifying question. It would either be there or the other side by the gymnasium.
Okay, yeah.
But there will be signs
There'll
up.
be-
You'll see
okay.
kids.
So as long as
Yeah.
you. Okay.
And that's it for now. As I talked about last week, we have a new website that's up and running. We've been getting feedback. And we're taking that feedback to make adjustments. One of the things Carrie and I talked about the other day was in terms of board feedback, if that could be filtered through Carrie and Kelly
Mhm.
as the SD board, that would be really great. And then after, a 2-week period or whatever we want it to be, we can then facilitate a time to share that feedback and see what's realistic in terms of making changes. So it's out there, it's up and running. It's not a final draft. I don't know that it ever will be a final draft. It's a continued work in progress, but we felt like we wanted to at least get it out there so that we can start getting feedback and making tweaks along the way. That's it for tonight.
Any questions from the board? All
We
right.
did bring a job description as well to the human resources generalist position.
And that was emailed as well.
Okay.
What should I do with it?
What's that?
What should I do with it?
Oh, I can take it at the end of the meeting. Yeah.
All right, moving on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Looking for any hands raised on Zoom. Public comment going twice. All right, we will move away from public comment and go on to the main event, which is the budget for tonight, special education and the allocation methods. So I think you have sharing ability, but tell me if you don't.
Okay, let me give it a run here. So we are ready to present the special education proposal for fiscal year 24. And I will fire up the Zoom. I think I can do that. Am I still connected?
You are still connected,
Okay.
and I think I've got the screen sharing going.
It's obscured in my view. I don't see it. There it is. It's behind everything. Okay, I will
I will click the share button. There we go. Very good. So I've shared the document that was emailed out, I think Monday, as a result of a lot of deliberation, preparation by Tate and Whitney, and that team. Joe, I see, has joined us as well. So I thought I would do our usual overview of the financial proposal, and then if we can turn it over to Tate and Whitney and to Joe to sort of elaborate on some of the programs, the initiatives, some of the challenges we're facing, and then obviously leave time for questions. So just to make sure everyone knows everyone, Tate Erickson, our Director of Special Education, Whitney Line is our elementary, do we call you a coordinator? Special ed coordinator, and Joe is here at the high school as the special ed secondary coordinator. Okay, and so what I'd like to do is to sort of help sort of synthesize a lot of information. You know, special education program has a lot of components to it. Just this afternoon, we created a summary document. It helps kind of focus our attention and allows us to kind of absorb the bigger picture. But keep in mind that this summary document that I've passed around, the 4-pager, it's in the same format as your detail. So if you have a question on like Academy, it's the first school, you'll see there's a page reference. It's all within pages 1 through 4 on the far right-hand column, just like we've done with other summary documents. So the total for the Academy school, if you go to the far right-hand document, you would see that same total and then all the details that go with that over here in this detailed 43-page document. And it identifies all of the program proposals that add up to the summary. So that's how we go from 43 pages to 4 pages. The other thing I'll just mention is that this is organized first by program, which in special education, we have our school age program. It's number 21. You see that in the very far left top of this document. And that's helpful to keep that in mind when you get into the detail. It just helps to kind of keep track of how information is organized. So school age, and then the second sort convention is all of the locally funded or assessed programs. So we'll see all program 21 local proposed programs, and then we'll see the grant funded programs. And then we go on to early education services, that's program 24. And then we go on to a new program, number 26. It's a compliance requirement with something referred to as budgeting for the proportionate share for our independent school partners and home study. So there's how we've organized the information. Overall, if we could now jump into the budget document, as usual, I like to sort of start out with a kind of the summary impact. If you go to the page 4, the back page, you see this proposal is up from 15.8 million in the current year to 17.4 million. You know, a significant increase, which we'll explain what drives this. But this is, as you see, a 9.9% increase. Coming back to more of the sort of the middle of the document, page 2. Most of that spending is in the locally assessed programs, as it always has been. So in the kind of in the middle of the page of page 2, you see something called local total. So those are the figures that we then reduce by state aid
Okay, so we take total cost to the SU because we're not a taxing entity. We reduce costs by the revenues we receive. And then the net amount is what's assessed to Vernon and the Windham Southeast School District. And that's what the allocation document speaks to, is how do we take that net cost and distribute it? This is a expenditure proposal tonight. We don't have all the information we need to develop the revenue side, the allocation side, but that is a schedule for next meeting. So as with the Windham Southeast School District proposal, we are seeing that similar shift where some of our grants are declining. So our grant spending is down somewhat, which pushes to some extent our local spending up to the extent that we need to commit to programs. So I'll just maybe spend another 5 minutes on some of the major changes that you see, and then I'll turn it over to Tate. So if we go back now to page 1 and just sort of go through each component, Academy School you see is up 25% at that site level. That represents primarily a significant increase in outside placement tuition expense. So that is part of the 440,000 increase right there on the first line. Tuition is part of considered direct instructional expense. And that's why it's in that first line. The 1,200 function is direct instruction. That increase also includes an additional case manager based on the number of student IEPs and the level of support students are need at this time. So that's the primary factor with driving costs for Academy. The significant increase you see also there in transportation is a related cost to the outside placement.
Right.
Yeah.
Why was there an increase in outside placement?
Do you want to speak to that, Tate?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are experiencing a lot of students that have significant dysregulation, and meaning that they are having escalated emotional and behavioral responses that are resulting in safety issues at times. In some instances, or lack of access to the programming and supports that we're providing in the public school. So those are the primary reasons we'd ever consider an outplacement. We're mandated by federal law to keep students in the classroom with their same age peers as much as possible throughout the day. In fact, our goal is 80% of students to be in the class at least 80% of the time. That's a goal we continue to strive for. However, we have to base our IEP team decisions on the individual student's needs. And at times their needs surpass the continuum of supports we're able to offer within our mainstream setting.
Is it pandemic related?
Likely.
And unfortunately, you'll see that is a recurring theme in most of our school sites, not all, but most. So the high school, you see total up 14%, and that is almost entirely associated with additional outside placements. As you see, that top line up 759,000. So as Tate just mentioned, it's at all grade levels, elementary and secondary. Dummerston actually you see a small decline in the proposal. The staffing is the same, but actually here what we see is an outside placement moving to the secondary level. So it's no longer budgeted at the elementary level.
Frank,
Yes.
are you looking at the budget summary for the special education? Is it, are you
Yes.
looking? Is
Yes.
there, I'm not finding it on our website and I don't have a copy. And so we're just looking at the front page. So it's a little hard to follow. Could you possibly put that up?
Yes, I was just looking for it and I don't have it. We just created it this afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But I can scroll on the main document so that you can follow along. So for
Okay.
example, here we go. I'm just scrolling to Dummerston, okay? And this kind of, thank you, Michelle. This kind of illustrates the, the document, the summary document that we're looking at for folks that have it here. Says page 11, so that's what we're going to scroll to, and then within there we can see the tuition proposal that I just mentioned. You see this line, Michelle? It's the 1201,562. We had a budget of 50,000, and we've removed that because of the there's no longer a need for that at the elementary level. I was also mentioning that we're on a relatively stable, total. And if you look at all of these line items that you have, Michelle, and I'm scrolling through, you can see that in general, it's a pretty balanced investment for meeting the student needs in Dummerston. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, and I will scroll along with the other districts. So thank you for that reminder. Guilford School, it's because it's a smaller school. When we have a change in any of the expenses, it can make quite a percent change. But in general, the Guilford proposal is also relatively stable. Unlike Dummerston, we do need to sustain tuition costs that is what attributes Guilford for being a little bit more than a typical inflation rate in today's economy. I've scrolled to page 12 if you're following along on the detail, and you see that where we've gone from 50,000 to 63,000 in that detailed proposal for Guilford. Putney is actually similar to Dummerston, where we do have some changes in staffing there, and I'm sure Tate will speak to that in a moment. But Putney is not sustaining a tuition expense, and that is why you see on our summary document, you also see it here in the detail on page 16. Why that proposal is down a little bit from the prior year. And then Vernon, I will scroll along here as well on the detailed document. For Vernon, Vernon is again it's the same level of staffing for next year, but the increase is almost entirely attributed to outside placements. And you see that also is reflected in the transportation proposal. Again, if you scroll to page 16, 17, 18, you'll see all of the detail that goes with each one of those line items, those summary line items. Oak Grove. Oak Grove is again one of our smaller schools, and in fact, the reason why you see on page 2 at the very top a fairly significant change. I've got it on the screen for anyone that's looking at page 18. It's all actually in health insurance. It's not a staffing change. It's simply an individual who previously did not take health insurance at all, moved on to the district plan, within the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement, and same staff, but just a change in an employee's election for access to the benefits. Green Street is actually a similar explanation. Same staff, but we had actually a more junior teacher leave, and a new hire was a senior teacher, very experienced and very capable, but that's what has pushed the Green Street proposal, as you see there on page 19 of the detail. So as I mentioned earlier, that brings us to the local totals. Okay, so after Green Street, and then we have the district-wide 4048 is the district-wide. So that would be starting on page 19 in the detail document. I'm sorry, page looks like it starts on page. Did I say 19?
Mhm.
Yeah, very bottom 19, and then page 20. That's primarily our intensive service needs program. That's about 800,000 of the total proposal. And then in addition to that, we have outside case managers. And this is where we have our speech language pathologists and our psychologist services, as well as OT and PT services. So that's the primary activity that's being funded there, and you do see a decline in that overall proposal, and that's actually a reflection of a reduction in staff. 3 positions associated with what we call our communication facilitator. That would be support for deaf students. Those students actually left our system. We were not able to fill earlier a SLP position, so there's a online provision for that as well. And then a behavior coach was also not able to be hired, and that's part of what is leading to the reduction in that total there. But it's still very much driven by student needs. The balance of this report are things that we get funded from other sources. So the rest of page 2 and page first half of page 3 are the grant programs, the one you've heard of, I'm sure. Remember the IDEA grant. It's approximately $1 million. And we do think that that's going to continue to be funded through the federal sources. It's a pass through the state. And just so folks know, as a reminder, this is where we charge our administrative costs. And the intent there is to make sure that all districts have a sort of a mutual benefit to the grant source. You know, it's not one district gets more than another in the access to grant funds. So that's been the case for many years, and fortunately the funding has been stable, so that's worked out fine. So that brings us down to the school age on page 3, the total 16,270,000. You see that? So that's the total school age of approximately 15.3 million in locally funded programs, and then an additional nearly $1 million funding through grants for our school age programs. And then moving on, we're now into a different program. It's the preschool program. Leaving the program 21, we're now looking at program 24. I will scroll on to the detail page. It starts on page 32. And this has been a stable program that serves approximately 70 kids that I believe are 3 and 4 year olds primarily.
3 to 5.
3 to 5. And you can see a relatively stable investment there in our program. Proposal up 3.9%. At the bottom of page 3 is it's the beginning of the grant funded programs, and it's a small support grant for our pre-K program as well. And that is basically the proposal. On page 4, you see the total. And I had mentioned that we have a new program 26. It's just got one line item, and it's something that the Agency of Education has asked us to initiate in the budget process, an allocation of the part of the IDEA grant to this proportional share of our home study and independent school partners. The district has to acquire the service and or the materials, and then allocate it to those who request.
I don't understand any of that.
So that would be like
Sorry.
would you like to address that?
We have a number of students that are either home study or unilaterally placed in our local independent schools within our district, or even students from other districts that are placed within that. And we have a obligation for child find for all students that are schooled within our district for home study. And we also have, as a part of our IDEA funds, a requirement to carve out a certain percentage based on that number of students that are unilaterally placed, and reserve those funds with a form of a process for identifying some amount of service that they can access based on those funds that we contract out for, let's say, a tutor, or for specialized programming, supplies, or subscriptions. It's not money we can give directly to an independent school or to a family, but we can provide a minimal service. They're not entitled to be provided a FAPE, which is what happens when you are enrolled in a public school, and we develop that IEP, which outlines what are the requirements to help that student access their education meaningfully. But we are to provide something, and that's at my discretion, and it's a written process. It's new, and not many people have yet been doing it in the state, but we are at a place where it's very evident that we need to make this change. So I'll be scheduling meetings with our independent schools and home study folks, offering the opportunity for meaningful consultation and developing a plan, individual service plans for students that are determined to be eligible, and parents that are interested. And then we'll allocate a portion of these funds based upon that. It's written into our assurances that we sign every year. It's been a point that they haven't provided a lot of training in the past. And what I do know in my research is that they are going to be enforcing this anytime now. And if you're not doing it, they're going to say, hey, give us all that money back. So we can't afford to, be remiss and not make a sharp turn and implement this assurance, essentially.
And then Tate, if you wanted to elaborate on any of the other program, changes, just.
So the state allocates money, this $53,000 is allocated to us. It's not carved out of our normal state
our
money.
normal allocation. And then from that, we have to determine the number of students that are unilaterally placed. And it comes out of our funds.
Oh, so it's not, so then they'll take the money, they'll
Yeah.
take it out.
Yeah, and that's where, Christina, if we just glance at that page 2 and on the detail document, that's where I was saying approximately $1 million, the IDEA. So when you're in page 29 in the detail, the state is asking us to, so at the bottom of page 29, you see 942,000, you see the proposal there. So we are anticipating $1 million award in fiscal year 24. And it's that 942 plus that 53,000 at the very end of the document. It's a split. It's the first time. That's why you see on the last page there 000 and then a new number It's because this is the first time they're saying you need to budget and you do need to pull out of your commitment to your programs 53,000 for potential requests.
Is that population based or just a percentage based? Population based, okay.
Yeah. And it's, if the requests don't come in, then we do turn that back into services to our students. But if the requests do come in, the funds are there up to that amount.
Are there questions?
Is there, when you say if the requests don't come in, do they have to, is there like a deadline or how do you, what if they're,
We'll have a meaningful consultation around that, and I will have a written process that I'm developing about how those funds are allocated. So, yeah, I don't believe it's a one and done. I think people can always inquire. I haven't created this as I've asked for models. The state's unable to provide me with a model in classic fashion. So I'm creating it with consultation and hope to have it be meaningful and to provide something. One thought was to provide something that makes the parents say, hey, I could get a lot more of this high quality piece if I enroll in my local public school. So I thank you, Frank. It's just truly been a pleasure to work with Frank, with our administrative team, to work on how to make sure we're right sizing and being responsive to the student needs that we are presenting for us. I provided a sheet here that shows student populations and staffing. I want to thank my assistant, Ellen Spearney, for helping me with this. It's excellent. What you can see is total SE, which is special ed students on site, has increased from last year being 253 students to now 353 to now 376 students. We were discussing this a little bit earlier. There's actually a good number of students that are in process right now, and that number is likely to go up. We're having a lot of referrals for the beginning of the year. Again, we do think that this is an artifact of the pandemic. We have increase in our outplacement. We were at 37.37 last year. We're up to 41. Now, 2 years ago, we had 42. The year before that, we had 48. So we have gone up some. Again, it's not a option we like to choose, but really feel that we're always looking to meet a need, and when it exceeds the continuum of supports within a school, and when a student's not accessing their education, we have to make determinations such as this.
Michelle has a question.
Yeah. One of the questions was about our student count. So I'm hoping that that information will be posted online too with when the budgets go up. That would be great.
Yeah, it was handed out at our last meeting. I've got a copy from before. This is the second time we've been given this, but we'll make sure it's online.
Student count for the special education services. Oh, yeah. I'll look at my files then.
Look in your pile.
We haven't done the projection, and we will be doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I had, and again, this is something I feel like I should be looking at notes, but this collaboration that we've just sort of entered it was just in the last month, I think we approved working with some of the other area SUs and working collaboratively. Is that reflected in this year's budget? Are we seeing that? And if so, I'm just curious where we would see that.
I think at some point we'll see the executive director that we hired. I don't know if it would be under the special education budget, though. It should be elsewhere, but I'll let Mark or Frank talk to that.
Yeah, and as we were talking at that meeting, it would be a cost neutral, which means if the collaborative and the administration bring to the board a program that we think they can do better, it would be under the assumption that it would also be cost neutral. So you probably won't see a line item in the budget for specifically for the collaborative unless
unless it's a cost reduction from something else that we're doing. But I think initially, our primary expectation is that for many of these positions, we're having trouble filling, like an SLP and or psychologist. There are several others, behavior interventionists. That the collaborative would have a much broader sort of market to draw from and then be able to share the recruiting efforts. So again, that's an example of not really having a cost, just being able to do something better.
In reducing contract limitations by offering more incentives.
Back to Tate. Oh,
I'm trying to read this. So you have 376 special ed students total in the district.
No, then you need to add the column below for other.
447.
Yeah, 447.
And then, yeah,
there are likely many more that are in process currently.
And Tate, these are just our school age kids, right?
Right.
We don't have
This does not count for
our 70 or early ed kids.
right,
And
our
then
3 to 5 year old.
And then I'm not sure if the intensive service kids are in here.
Yeah, they are.
They are in. Okay.
then you have staff 114, the very bottom. Then I'm confused because how do you get the ratios? Like Brattleboro 11.3.
Were you going to walk us through that document?
yeah, I was gonna say, want to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so with the 447 school age special education students, then we next show our instructional special education teaching full-time equivalents. So you can see that we've increased in Brattleboro by 3. We've decreased by 0.5 at Dummerston and Guilford, and are stable at 3 each in Putney and Vernon, and as well increasing by 3 at BUHS, while being stable at BAMS. So a total of 44 teachers, which is up by 6, according to what was last year's mark. And then below that, then that's our ratios. So taking those teachers with the caseloads that they have, these are their average caseloads. We like to see them be above at a minimum 10, ideally towards 12. And so you can see that Brattleboro really has a good rate there at 11.3 for this elementary age. Dummerston is at 10. And so those numbers are up from last year significantly. Guilford is over 10, 10.7. Putney's down just slightly. Vernon is up, and they're actually our highest ratio. BAMS is down by 1%, and our 1 student per staff. And BUHS is up now at our highest rate in the whole district at 12.6 students per average teaching staff. Obviously, these numbers vary dramatically in each school, and oftentimes our case managers are assigned to a certain grade level band, you know, early elementary, middle, or upper elementary versus middle school or high school. And our high school has a unique structure. With that, we've talked about the inclusion model that Joe has been working with his team to have students receiving core instruction in the classroom, and then AST or special education support services offered either in class and then as well after core instruction to come and do individualized work. Down below at the bottom, this includes our certified and classified staff, totaling 114 staff total, with an average of 3.5 students per staff. That includes all of our paraeducators, all of our staff. We did do a little moving around of things, but a primary piece of this has been increases in our wages and benefits, which I want to thank you for, because it means we're better staffed than most of our regional neighbors. who are really struggling to find and hire and retain high quality special educators. So it's greatly appreciated, and it means that we have less potential for contention and legal fees because we're able to much more readily meet needs. Want to add anything?
Sure. One thing that I was just thinking about and looking at today and looking at these updated numbers is, and talking with our West evaluation team, and like Kate mentioned, we have had quite a number of initial evaluations this year, and students who are requiring a lot of support. And so far, total, we have had 57 initial evaluations that have been started. And of those to date, 11 have been completed, and 10 of those 11 have been found eligible for special education. So they don't show up on this document yet because we have 30 days once a student is found eligible for special education to actually put an IEP in place and have them be active in our system. But I did just want to, share those numbers with you because 57 initial evaluations in, December is a lot. And when 10 out of 11 children are so far eligible for special education, we do, we just have a great need in the district, and those kids just don't show up on here yet. So just another thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about case managers and ratios. Often these students, they might already be working with special educators just in an informal capacity while they're going through this process to figure out what layer of supports they need. So that was just a piece that I wanted to share. Yeah.
So have they just been receiving informal aid from September to now?
It depends entirely on the student and their needs. Sometimes they've been working with academic support teachers. So we have multiple layers of intervention and support at each of our schools. And then sometimes students, just depending on the group that they fit best with and what their individual needs are, some students would be working, they might work with an AST or a layer 2 teacher for reading, but maybe their needs are a little more intense in math. They work with a special educator in math. As they go through this process. And then the IEP would eventually, if they're found eligible, determine exactly what they need from special education.
Other questions?
Does this include 504 costs?
No, great question, Liz. 504s are an unfunded mandate from the federal government. So those are regular ed expenses.
Can you just remind me? The example I think we always use to explain this is a 504 is, let's say there's a student who has broken their arm and they need short-term assistance to do writing, or is
I like the broken leg and you have a 2-story school and a kid wants to take a class on the 2nd floor, but there's no funding to build the elevator. So they have to move the class.
you have to figure it out.
Yeah,
Okay.
provide access, equal access and opportunity.
Okay.
Typically accommodations based.
Accommodations is a good way to put it. Does that help, Liz?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, go.
Are the trends that we're seeing with the increase in special education referrals, are they being seen throughout the state of Vermont as well?
I believe so.
Okay. Because when I first started this game, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, the state came after us for they said we had too high a referral, and then they reviewed all the referrals and said they were all good. But that was where the movie started for me. So I wondered if I was coming back around to the
To the
preview
sequel.
of coming attractions and the sequel. So it's understandable, I guess, under the circumstances, but just.
I think our pressure is we've moved to a census-based block grant funding system. So there's only so much money we're going to get. And so we are, fine tuning our MTSS, the work we're doing as an administrative team is pivotal within this, to ensure that we're very strong in our layer one, our general ed core instruction. And then that our tier two, our layer two is super strong in providing targeted intervention to stop kids from having loss and needing something even more intensive, which is
Driven by data.
Yeah, so it's driven by data. And we're trying to use research-based interventions to really turn the curve and keep our numbers at the right size. Again, we need to identify students who are in need and who truly are eligible. And we, can't always say it's just based on $1. We need to, in the end, meet that need.
I think another area that we've really focused on this year is matching our professional development to our needs. And as an example, we're talking about outplacements, right? And I think there's a recognition that there are significant behavioral needs across the district. And we're fortunate enough to have many highly qualified and trained board certified behavior analysts within our district that work at our schools. But they were able to plan and run and facilitate a 3-hour training for all para educators K through 6 and who wanted to join. And there were many, I think they had almost 85 or 90 para educators that came to this training, general education, like classroom para educators, to more general special education para educators, and then also the para educators that actually work within our STEP programs and have more expertise. And so it was an opportunity for those para educators who have different levels of expertise to collaborate and also work with our really amazing BCBAs in receiving training around de-escalation and, helping students regulate themselves, and so that they can spend more time in class doing the learning that they need to do. So I think that, we're just being really responsive with that. We also did a special education law training with Adrian Shea just recently in preparation for the Act 173 changes that'll be coming up. So
I have another question.
sure.
I think we lost money when we went from a census-based to a block grant. Is that right? Because there is a movement afoot to go back to, I think, the census-based for funding.
Right, census-based is in effect. It's been in effect this year for the first time, and it's continuing to be in effect for fiscal year 24. And we haven't received the ADM. It is per ADM, but our preliminary estimates look like it's going to be stable funding for fiscal year 24. Unfortunately, our costs are up quite a bit, and it no longer is a function of a percentage of spending. But as you heard tonight, many of our costs are associated with outside placements, and that provision of the funding law for special education is still in place. And that provision is after the first $63,000 per student, we receive 95% state aid from the Agency of Ed. So I'm working with Tate to calculate that revenue, and clearly, given the significant increase in the outside placement expenses, we will see some relief when we get to the assessment, because remember, it's our spending minus the state aid is a net amount. And I did want to, if we could spend just a few minutes on the allocation methodology. It does sort of illustrate Liz's question, why that's so important.
Please.
This good time?
Did you send that to us?
I did send that
I feel
out
like
on
that was
Monday
sent.
with the whole,
Yeah.
with
With the whole
budget
packet.
Yeah. And I'll share my screen
Oh,
again.
great, thank you. And on 173, how many years to work our way into it? Was it 5?
Fiscal year 25 is when theoretically the weighting is going to go into effect.
Okay. Wasn't there a
but there
hold
is-
harmless though? For
Yes, through, I believe fiscal year 29 is a hold harmless in that if the weighting formula creates a variance from the prior tax rate more than, I think it's 5%, then there's a hold harmless provision in the law. But at this point, fiscal year 24 is not subject to that. It is subject to the census block grant, but it is not subject to a change in the weighting formulas.
Okay.
So the allocation methodology, I've shared my screen. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories of expenses. That's on the left-hand column over here. Functions to allocate. And then on the right side of this document is the method to allocate the cost. And this has not changed for several years now. I think this went into effect maybe in like 2017. We did have to make somewhat of a little bit of an accommodation once we merged, but it really didn't change the sort of the philosophy of allocating costs. When we merged in 2020 and Vernon did not continue to be part of the Brattleboro Union High School or what's now the Windham Southeast School District, the philosophy is the same. It just says that if for all of our tuition towns like Dover at the secondary level, Marlboro, we just have to be consistent in the methodology in which we allocate costs. And it is still proportional on enrollment. So I'll just take a moment to go through this, and as I say, there's no change. I've just brought in the update to the date, fiscal year 24 versus 23. So for the administrative costs and supportive instruction proposal that was sent out, and we discussed last week at our budget meeting, it's the 2-year average of the student census. So a census was sent to the Agency of Ed for November 18th for the first 40 days of this school year. And that is going to be averaged with that same census last November. So we take 2 years of student average daily membership and we average it. And then we look at what is Vernon as a proportion of the total? What is the SD as a proportion of the total? And that's all we have. It used to be 7 districts. Now it's just 2. So another, quick point of reference that you've seen because it's part of your budget package that you would have had last year. I'll just click on the allocation. Did your spreadsheet change on the Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. So just super simple. We won't get into the details here, but just to illustrate, here's our grade levels and our 2 districts on the far left. This is on a single sheet of paper that's in your budget package. And so you see, I have identified school sites here, but we have a subtotal of the SD in 2021. So this time last year, 2,043 for the students and the SD. And then there's Vernon 159, and these are at the schools, not K-12. It's kids at the school. So Vernon was for the budget for 23, which is this budget we're in now, 6.9% of the total. So Vernon gets 6.9% of the total admin assessment, less any revenue that we might receive. And so we'll be updating this as soon as I get that data from Brad James. Going back to the methodology, just the narrative. That's what this means right there, that little narrative. There's a lot of repeating here. It's basically the same. For school age elementary expenditures. So school age elementary, it's all special education costs in one pool. It includes Vernon. And we look at those same statistics, regular ed enrollment, and it's the same allocation. At the secondary level, it's a little different because, as I said, we've got to be consistent with all of our tuition schools or districts. Actually, it's tuition districts at the secondary level. And, the statutes are pretty straightforward on that. So essentially, it's the same thing. It's just that we have to identify secondary costs at Vernon, both at Brattleboro Union High School, and then also Vernon may pay an entity directly because the student is not at Brattleboro Union High School. So we have to capture both of those costs, subtract the revenue that is attributed to those special ed funding streams, and then there's a net cost, largely driven by proportional enrollment. If it's a direct cost, Terry, as you know, where Vernon has incurred a cost directly to a district that is not Brattleboro Union High School, then that's a straight allocation of tuition. So if an entity bills Vernon for a secondary student for $50,000, Vernon has to reimburse the SU that $50,000. The state requires the SU to disperse all costs on behalf of the districts for special education.
And in our school choice policy, however, we do have you must be pre-approved for special ed costs. So we don't, just so people don't think that we're sending kids anywhere. It has to be part of it's part of the process.
That's important for our new director to be aware of.
I will send you that.
Yeah.
That's in our policy.
For raising that.
Yeah.
So that's special education. The essential early ed, or now we're referring to it as early childhood special education. So that's the preschool, the 3 to 5 year olds. It's the same standard as the administrative budget. It's just regular ed enrollment, proportional. And then transportation has been based on the number of buses assigned to the district. So that's been three buses for the Vernon district, 14 buses for the SD. And these are 5-year bid documents, and we are up for a new contract in July of 2023. So we'll be working on the successor proposal, but the methodology to allocate costs, I would assume, would not change. As a side, I am trying to find a way to work with that vendor to buy electric buses through a subsidized, federal program. I was disappointed we were not on the priority list on the first round that the EPA offered. Some of our districts in Vermont were, and I was disappointed that we were not. But anyways, that's the allocation methodology, as approved by the board in several previous years.
All right, so I don't want to rush us because I know this is important, but it is 7 and we do have 2 people waiting for us. But any final questions, concerns, you can always email me. I know we've got I received a couple emails with questions that I will make sure we get answers either at our next meeting or maybe during the week.
Sure.
If we can.
Yep.
Do you want to give us a preview of what's next? I can't remember what next week is.
Yeah, our next meeting. So for next Wednesday on our schedule, we have the food service program and the revenue assumptions. So revenue meaning these allocations and hopefully the ability to predict the state aid amounts.
Yeah, we usually don't get ADMs until the 15th, which never happens, right? Okay, just so I get my schedule
I'm
right.
hoping I get a preliminary number.
Okay.
And Brad James has indicated that he's working on it, and it's possible that we'll have a preliminary number before the 15th. So our next meeting is for the 14th. And If I have it, I'll present it. If I don't have it, I'll do my best to estimate it.
And if at all possible, can you include the document with the agenda?
And we did, yeah.
I think some of them are there. And then I think did you get a big, you should have gotten these on Monday. Or what did we get on Monday?
Yeah, you got the detail
We got the
budget
detail.
and you got the job description and the allocation methodology.
That was in our Monday email. Oh,
Posted.
but we can post. We can work to post. I can talk to Barb about posting.
Because these are posted on the website as well.
They might, I wonder if they're not under the agenda, but if they're
Oh,
under
yeah,
the
yeah, they
finance
should be.
office, so maybe we just need to tweak that. If you
That
go,
might be the new website.
Just on the agenda,
that's easier. Okay, okay. We
Yeah,
can
and that definitely is our Steve.
post to agenda. We can work on that. Let's see what we can do. All right. So we'll,
I know you mentioned that you've got folks waiting. I just wanted to let you know that we did have answers to those questions, but we don't need to do it now if you.
okay, if you want to send them to me, I can then
Sure.
gather them up and
Yeah.
there could be more. All right. Good to see you, Christina. All right, so I would now entertain a motion to enter executive session under 1 VSA 313A3 superintendent evaluation. And for this first part, we're going to invite in Sue Siglowski. And then subsequently, we will be inviting in Mark and Elaine. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
That is Kelly. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, thank you, Liz. All those in favor of entering executive session under 1 VSA 313A3 superintendent evaluation, say aye.
Aye.